Hello and welcome to the Eye on the U podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Hurricanes podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Orange Bowl Hall of Famer Susan Miller-Degnan, Hurricanes beat writer here at the Herald. Susan, you were honestly the biggest star of the Orange Bowl, given the way that game went. That was the highlight, I think, of everyone's night.
Well, I did get applauded in the press box.
That's
I
true.
don't think I doubt anybody on the field was watching, but
Most of
I
the
am.
rest of the game was groans in the press box because that was basically a 3.5 hour waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, but it's still, I love the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
It's still always fun, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
have a good time.
Yeah, it's a good, we get to see a lot of people, obviously, from all around the country. And,
You,
and it always,
yeah,
it always seems like all the South Florida media is there too. So it's a good
and
chance
it's
to
fun.
see a lot of people. And usually the games have been pretty good over the last couple
Yeah.
of years.
And
I mean,
not
we've
only
seen
that,
great
yeah.
ones in recent years. This is
Oh,
an outlier for
we've seen some
sure.
great ones, and also David, like, it's very festive.
Yeah.
It's very pretty. It's the flyover. It's a big deal. I mean,
The
nationally,
weather was great. It was like I mean, it's a little chilly, but like this
it was
the
incredible.
The sunset was
And
great. It was an early start, 4 o'clock Orange Bowl is unusual, obviously. It's almost always a late
yeah, it
game.
was. Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of, and you know what? No matter what they say is you know, the attendance and all that.
mhm.
There's still always, when you compare it to the games, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people. I mean, it's fun. There's the tailgating's amazing, right? When you walked in, a lot
Yeah.
of tailgating, a
Yep.
lot of
Yeah, and you
party.
got obviously a lot of Florida State and Georgia fans were there, but there's a lot of Canes fans there. It's a it's those bowl games are always like that. Like I went to like the Boca Raton Bowl because Syracuse was in it. The second worst blowout of bowl season. Syracuse losing 45-0 that quickly gets upstaged by 63-3 in the Orange Bowl. And obviously it's mostly Syracuse and USF fans, but we went with a couple FAU fans and there's just Gators like the cheap tickets. Obviously the Orange Bowl is different. The tickets aren't cheap, but it's um
No,
bowls are fun.
no,
I like bowls. We got one game left in this college football season, and
one
I
game.
watched a lot of crappy bowl games in December and made the most out of it. Um, we've got a couple topics to hit on today. We'll talk a little
Okay.
more about the Pinstripe Bowl, particularly the quarterback play there, because that's the main focus of this episode. Is the quarterback situation because this week a bunch of the top quarterbacks go off the board. Um, Including kind of headlined by Cam Ward deciding to go pro. But we'll get to what all that means for Miami, who might still be out there for Miami. As far as like direct Miami news, the big one this week is Jakari Brown after I thought pretty solid Pinstripe Bowl
Uh,
performance. I think both of us
yeah.
were relatively impressed.
Yes.
Deciding to stay at Miami and come back for another year. I think both of us, we talked last week, that was like what we thought made the most sense. Um, One just doesn't, he's a very interesting developmental prospect. I don't know if he's going to be a starting quarterback anywhere. If he had transferred anywhere in a Power Five level next year, so Miami, where he has clearly had some good moments. Obviously wants to be here. He committed here and stuck with Miami even after a coaching change. He committed when Manny Diaz
Yep.
was the coach. So they able to keep him around, and they kind of need him right now. I mean, we'll see. They're obviously still trying to get a quarterback, but they just need bodies at quarterback. They were thin on bodies, and bringing him back, I think is really a really positive development for Miami.
Yeah. To me, it's really big. Uh, I mean, first of all, he only played in one game this
Yep.
season, right? In the bowl game. And I, it was fun to watch him.
Yeah.
We've talked about that. He's 6'4", every bit of 6'4", and he's very imposing, physically imposing, and super athletic. Super agile and, can get out of the pocket and scramble uh, and his arm, oh my God, David, his arm is like I don't know, like a rifle. I mean,
Yeah. He's got a cannon.
he's got a cannon, man. And that, like, in that game, he was 20 of 31. Part of the knock on him is his accuracy. That's what it was last year,
Hmm.
passing. And he was 20 of 31, which is 64.5%, very respectable.
Yep.
And he had one bad interception. He had one passing touchdown and really
Yeah, I thought he made a couple
beautiful
great
passing
throws.
touchdown.
Yeah.
Beautiful to Xavier Restrepo. But then he had another one to Xavier, that the one, the butt where his butt was down, his
Yeah,
feet.
it could
I
have been
thought,
a touchdown. They
I,
called it incomplete, obviously, but that was a great throw and could have
oh
been,
my,
easily been called a touchdown, very like 50-50 call.
definitely,
And I
definitely.
mean, and the first play of the game, the bomb to Jacoby George
Oh
that,
my
that
God.
George dropped. Um,
Ah,
that's as like that's gonna be his strength if he ever becomes a starting quarterback in Miami, other than obviously his running ability. That's, with that frame, because he's
right.
big too, right? It's not like he's a guy who's just going to
Strong.
scramble around. Like you can draw up 6 yard runs for him in the way that like the Eagles do for Jalen Hurts or the Bills do for Josh Allen, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to compare him to those guys because he's got a long way to go, but he's got that sort of physical running style that lets him be a real factor in the running game. But if you can have a dominant running game with him, he's gonna beat you deep every once in a while because those deep throws on those long post routes, like he can hit those. Obviously, his accuracy, as you mentioned, remains a question mark,
Oh my God.
but
Yeah.
that was a perfect throw on that first play, and that's something he certainly can do.
He releases it. He releases his release seems quick to me. To you too? I mean, when he goes to throw, boom, it's very far, very fast. Um, and the one thing I did want to tell you was that just because he's coming back now, I talked to his coach, Ron Veal, who's a
Hmm.
Atlanta-based private quarterbacks coach. And I read this in other stories too. Just because he's coming back now does not mean that he has to stay past spring.
Right.
Because the interesting thing is, and we'll get to this a little bit later too, the transfer portal closed on Tuesday at midnight, and Jakari was not in there. And we don't know when spring practices, but last year it was March 4th to April 14th, I
Hmm.
believe.
Pretty much always in that range,
It's in
basically.
that window. So, and here's the thing, the next window opens April 15th to April 30th. It's a 2-week window,
Hmm.
15-day, whatever window. So Jakari will be able to have will have been able to go through spring practice and see where he stands. Now, the thing is, and this is where the thing is right now, the only healthy quarterbacks are Jakari
Yeah.
on scholarship because Judd Anderson, who is a high school kid, is getting here in a couple of weeks
Right.
for the next semester. He's a baby. I mean, he's right out of high school, so he's not gonna. I doubt very much he's gonna end up starting. I mean, he's in the race, but you've got no veterans really. Jakari's, you can't really call him one
Yeah, I
after
mean, he
playing
is
one.
going to be he'll be a redshirt sophomore next year, so he is
Right,
like going to be an upperclassman
but he can,
academically. But yeah, he's
he
has
doesn't have to
what,
stay.
4 starts under his belt and
Yeah.
was the third string quarterback
Oh,
this year.
he doesn't
So
he doesn't have to. Well, he has 3 starts now
3
under.
starts now. Yeah.
He doesn't have to stay. I mean, he could be gone, and
Yeah,
then
well, yeah. So obviously Emory Williams is coming back from an injury.
and Emery.
Who knows,
I
I don't know. Is
I
he going to play
doubt.
in the spring?
I doubt
That
it.
injury seemed too bad for him to be ready for
Yeah,
the spring.
I
Now
don't
maybe
think
he'll
he.
throw a little bit, but he's not going to, certainly not in like the spring game. We're not going to see him, I don't think. So yeah, they don't
No,
have a lot of quarterbacks, and the interesting thing is that like Judd's going to be there in time for practice. Jakari, assuming he, will be healthy, and that's it. Because even if they get a transfer quarterback, as you said, like I guess a grad transfer could potentially be enrolled in time for the spring, but there's a couple of big names who have entered the portal in the last week or so. There's not a lot of time for Miami to get a quarterback on campus. So we'll see if they can add someone in time for spring practice. but
Well, yeah, it's a bad situation. I mean, let's talk about what happened with, their number one target, the
yeah,
guy that they thought they were going to get, and actually, uh, from what we've heard, he already kind of had deals, unsigned deals ready to
yeah.
go.
I mean, there were a lot of kind of like reports of like a silent commitment. There was something from I think the All-American Bowl, which is out in San Antonio, going on this week, or maybe it was at the Under. It was one of the Under Armour game,
Under
one of the
Armour,
All-American games, where
right?
Jeremiah Smith, the five-star wide receiver, said he
Oh,
had talked to Cam Ward, and there
and
was an
Cam
idea
said,
that they
"If
were
you
both.
go, I'll go."
Yeah, I mean, you never know how much of that is just like guys talking, but still, like, still clearly seemed like by the end for Cam Ward, it was either going to be Miami or in the NFL, and he decides on the NFL instead. And I mean,
Right.
that's a tough blow for Miami because in the same week, basically, you get, and I know Miami wasn't necessarily in on all of these guys, but there's some of the big names that landed elsewhere. DJ Uyunglele going to Florida State. You get KJ Jefferson going to UCF. Um,
Right.
a lot of the top quarterbacks went off the board that week. Guys that made
That
sense for
day,
Miami. Yeah, that day. I think a couple
right?
of those were
Like
that
right
day.
in a row.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then obviously like before that, you got what Malik Murphy going to Duke from Texas, Kyle McCord from Ohio State going to Syracuse. Like a lot of the top guys who I think were some of the most interesting prospects on the board. Will Rogers going to Washington, all heading elsewhere. And Miami is like
And now
it's kind of musical chairs, and they're the one
Miami,
right now without a chair. There's a couple of guys still out there, including Malachi Nelson, Will Howard, who I think everyone kind of assumes is going to Ohio State.
even though he visited, he's the only other one that
Yeah, who
visited
visited
Miami.
Miami so far. The big one who went into the portal this week that I think is pretty interesting is Caden Salter from Liberty, who obviously led them to an undefeated regular season this year. He entered the portal after their bowl game, so he's kind of like the one like proven star I think left in the portal right now.
And they were talking about Malachi Nelson.
Yeah,
But we keep thinking that wants a bridge,
yeah,
just a 1 year quarterback till they develop some of the younger guys. And Malachi Nelson played in one game through 3 passes with one incompletion for 0 yards.
yeah.
And even though he was 5 stars and, you know,
Yeah, those 1 year guys, and it's interesting. We talked about this. I kind of like the idea of going for a younger guy. I'd probably like someone a little more proven than Malachi Nelson.
right.
Um, but I mean, if you get Malachi Nelson, you're not going to complain, I don't think. Um, but I kind of like the idea of getting a multi-year guy because I'm not like blown away by any of the younger quarterbacks yet, where I'm like, this guy's clearly the guy of the future. I think both of us like Jakar. I think both of us like Emery. I know you like Judd from talking to him. But none of those guys have proved so far very much. So that's Miami's kind of in that spot where unless they get Will Howard, which I guess seems increasingly unlikely as most people just
Yeah.
assume he's headed to Ohio State, you're probably, we'll see if they can make a move on Malachi Nelson, who's visiting Boise State this weekend. West Coast guy
Yeah.
seems to be
Now
able
they're
to
saying he wants more of
stay
that
out.
kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Caden Salter, only a sophomore. He could be one and done potentially if he has a great season, but could also be a multi-year guy. Um, and kind of falls off after that. Jaden Mayava is another kind of interesting one who entered the portal. I think in the last week from UNLV, who
Mhm.
was a freshman there and had a really
Yeah.
good season for UNLV. That had their best season in like literally that I can ever remember. So I don't know. It kind of feels like they're gonna be stuck with like a not stuck with because I kind of think it's not the worst thing in the world, but it seems like they're gonna have to wind up with a younger guy than a guy like whether it was obviously Cam Ward was the top one, but KJ and DJU fall in that same category of like we're trying to win this year, so let's get a guy who's trying to play one more season, and just give us a pretty high floor.
Well, I think they need, yeah, I think actually in a perfect world, they get 2 quarterbacks,
Yeah, that's true.
but they get a young Malachi Nelson, and then they get one that has like 1 year left. But who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. They waited a long time.
Yeah, I mean it's
They
a
took
problem.
they took the
It seemed like they thought they had Cam Ward, right? Like, and then you
Then
miss
you
out. I
just
don't want to say they missed out, and like who knows if they would have wanted KJ Jefferson either way, but you miss out
right,
on the opportunity to even like try to make a run at him if you wanted it.
right. Yeah. So this, I mean, they have time. I mean, that January 16th is when classes start.
Right. So they got about 2 weeks to get this figured out. And
And
I
they've
think his
got to get through.
ad drops probably a couple of days after that. So you got about 2 weeks plus
You have
to.
to, yes, you have some day. You do have days after that, a few days.
Mhm.
Um, so we'll just really have to see what happens. I did a story on the transfer portal situation. I put that they had 12 guys. It might be 13 now. There's some kicker. I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know if he was a walk-on. I don't know who said he's transferring or something, but I didn't really know him too well. But out of the what happened was right on deadline, actually, that day, um, uh, Devontae Brown,
Yeah.
it was reported that he entered the portal, kind of, and people were Monte Brown out of Plantation American
Right.
Heritage, cornerback, and he
Older
had
brother of
transferred
Damari
from
Brown.
UC.
Yeah.
Of course, he's Damari,
Hmm.
freshman, who was a freshman this year, who ended up starting the last 4 games. Damari did. Damari ended up the liked him. I mean, he's good and he's a
And he's
freshman.
young. Yeah. Very promising.
So he's young. Yeah, he's good. People were worried that or people are worried maybe. Well, no, now he's not going to go. He didn't enter a portal, that he'd leave and go somewhere where his brother is, but that would make no sense.
Mm-mm.
That he has a future at Miami and they like him here, and I feel bad. The brother is really nice. His older brother.
Yeah. And was one of their big
Uh,
portal additions this time
yes,
last
it
year.
was.
Yeah.
It really was. So he left, and then some of the other players, just if people want to know, obviously you got quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, Brashard Smith. We talked about Brashard Smith. I don't know if we've actually
Yeah, it was
talked
right
about him yet.
after the bowl game. Yep. After he didn't play in the
Yeah,
bowl game.
he did not go to yeah, so he's going, and people were kind of angry, split, either angry at him for whatever reason, or and
Mhm.
for not
Using
having done
him.
his
Yeah.
job as well as he should have done, or been as attentive, or worked as hard, or whatever people are saying, or
Hmm.
academics. I don't know which one's true, but and also some people are mad at the coaches for not utilizing him the way they could have. So he ended up number 4 in kickoff returns nationally. And then Colby Young, we talked about, is at Georgia now. And Frank Ladson, of course, and Jaleel Skinner and Don Chaney Jr. They lost. And then on defense, Collins, I can't say his last name, Achiampong. I know I'm
Chiampong,
saying
yeah. We never really talked to him, so never got to ask that one.
yeah, he's gone. And I think he's at UCLA now. I think he went to UCLA. I'll see. And then Cyrus Moss,
Yep.
Jahari Harvey, and Chance Williams, 4 defensive ends. And then they lost linebacker Corey Flagg. So pretty interesting. Now, David, they have more. Oh, there's one quarterback we haven't talked about, but they have more They have more than 85 on scholarship.
Hmm.
I think it's about 89 now. So somehow Mario's got to get rid of 4 players who
Yeah.
are
I
on
mean, there'll be some
scholarship.
more stuff after the
That's the
spring,
bottom
I
line,
guess,
right?
right?
I,
We'll see. I'm sure they want to add
I
guys too. So yeah,
well,
there'll have to be some
yeah.
attrition, I guess, as we go down, especially, 89 and they clearly still want to add another quarterback. So whatever they do to do that.
And maybe some other players,
Right, that's the other
maybe
thing.
some
It's like
really good.
80, they want to, yeah. I mean, they only have what, 3 transfers committed so far, something like
And
that.
yeah. What about the next signing day coming up?
Yeah, I don't think
I mean, that adds
maybe
players
one
too.
more recruit. They're still in the mix for a pretty highly
Zay,
ranked cornerback,
am I
Mincy.
saying it
Yeah,
right?
Zay Mincy. But other than that, I don't
He's a corner, not a
a
safety.
defensive back, safety defensive back. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Right,
between a quarterback, if they get that uh commitment this weekend, and as you that puts them over 90 already, and then as you said, they probably want to add more talent via the portal. Yeah, there'll have to be more stuff going out in
right,
the spring, and some of these guys, I guess also we don't know. Not everyone is like announced declared for the draft or whatever. I know like all the guys who are have draft possibilities have made their decision, but there are guys who are kind of like sort of out of eligibility because they've been around for so long, upperclassmen. So we'll see
right.
how the roster shakes out. But quarterback, obviously, like it all has like nothing. It's kind of tough because it's hard to get much else done until you figure that spot out. Because if you don't, again, like that's part of the reason Jakari is so important is because we don't know what that situation is going to look like next year. Um, but if you don't get that figured out, it's hard to imagine this team competing in the ACC next year.
Yeah, and you know what? We didn't mention, even though it's almost impossible that they're going to get him, but you never know. Mario's pretty good at stuff. Talia
Yeah, Talia Tagovailoa
Tagovailoa.
remains, I guess, kind of like the wild card in this whole thing, who's technically out of eligibility, would have to get a waiver. Um,
Yes,
obviously
he's
she
out
would.
of eligibility.
So yeah,
He would
to
have
me,
to get
like,
it out, but apparently his family wants him here in
yeah,
Miami to be with Big Bro.
yeah. So
So,
that'll be
uh,
interesting to see if he gets a waiver, then obviously that's an indication. I think that Miami's got their thing figured out. Um, if not, I think Salter's kind of the
yeah,
interesting guy left, younger and really good. Um, trying to transfer up a level from Liberty. Auburn, I guess, will be, that's Hugh Freeze coached him at Liberty and is now at Auburn. And Auburn quarterback play was pretty shaky in their bowl game with Peyton Thorne. But I think for Miami, that's the guy. If I'm Miami, I'm trying to make a hard move at now. And while also, they got to start. I'm sure that behind the scenes, they're trying to like figure out what the Talia thing is going to be like. Because, for all we know, he could get a waiver tomorrow, and all of a sudden
that
Miami
would be,
quarterback
yeah,
situation figured out.
that would be a huge
Yeah,
splash. Talk about marketing.
yeah, seriously.
I mean, really, I mean, that would be seriously. Although supposedly he's not a sure thing to get drafted.
No, I don't
That's
think I don't expect I would not expect him to get drafted. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's a lock to get drafted at all. I think he makes a lot of sense for me on the Dolphins practice squad or something next year, um, or
that
as
would be,
Miami's starting quarterback. So like I don't know, move down to
yeah,
Miami and figure it out. I guess.
that would be really
Um,
cool.
Before we wrap
And
up, do you want to touch quickly on Lance Guidry, LSU
sure,
defensive coordinator job opens? You wrote a little bit about it this week because Lance Guidry was asked about this earlier in the year, the possibility of the LSU defensive coordinator job coming open. Obviously, he's a
yeah,
Louisiana guy, has coached in that state, a bunch of different schools, I think, right? So. Uh, what's the latest there? Have you heard anything? Obviously, there's
I
no news in terms of like anything
no,
imminent, but um, I think both
no,
of us are
I
really impressed by what Lance Guidry did this year, and would not be a surprise if his name pops up in that conversation.
oh, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, think he did a great job this year. You got to remember in the bowl game they were missing James Williams, right, and Cam
Jim
Kinchins, both
Kitchens,
starting safeties. Um, they were missing LT Leonard Taylor. Trying to think who else on defense. I mean, that's right
yeah,
there. That's bad, you know. So I, they so that kind of brought they let up a lot of rushing yards.
hmm
Um, but he still finished. LSU was terrible. Oh my God, I looked up their stats.
yeah.
Horrible.
Their offense was like
Like,
one of the best ever, and their defense was one of the
yeah,
worst.
the offense was like incredible, and they finished 10-3, I think.
Yeah,
And but they were like 105th in total defense and just 114th in third down, conversion percentage, 115th in passing yards allowed. But not bad, 11th in rushing defense nationally, 24th in total defense. And at one point they were like way up, number one, number
Yeah.
two, whatever. They were 42nd in scoring defense, 20th in sacks and tackles for loss. And 36 and passes intercepted. So, but Guidry's answer, do you remember that? Or no, you weren't there. It was so interesting. He said, you always want to be wanted. Those places that are talking, I've got an agent, and my agent hasn't told me anything about that. So it's just people chirping and talking. And then he said, as the season is finished, he'll sit down with Coach Cristobal and talk about next year's plan and what we'll do at Miami. And then he said something that every coach I've ever covered that left said this. This is a job I have, and I love it here. We're building something special. I'm not looking to go anywhere. So until somebody picks up the phone and calls me, it's not real. Okay, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of good defensive coaches in the nation. So
yeah. That would be a tough loss for Miami, but we'll see if anything comes to pass there. I was noted ESPN did rank their top 100 players of the season a few days ago. And only one Hurricane on there. Who do you think it was?
Bain.
No, number 94 player in the country as a freshman. Obviously, a lot of that is Bain's own talent. A lot of that is the defensive coordinators, but Lance Guidry and Mario Cristobal also having the confidence in, like that. That's good. It was a really good.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Got out of their own way there, and I think a good coaching job to get the most out of really good freshmen.
That's amazing.
And it just speaks. They played a lot of freshmen, as you mentioned. Damari Brown started the last 4 games of the season at corner. Jaden Wayne obviously made his first career start at defensive end in the Pinstripe Bowl. So yeah, I thought a really good coaching job from Lance Guidry this year. And this is a defense that has, they got to replace obviously guys up the middle at defensive tackle and safety, but the personnel, the youth, and I think a pretty good defensive coordinator. If Guidry's back, that has a chance to be a really, really good defense next season.
Yes, for sure. Definitely. They need him, especially with the guys leaving. And he's a safety. The thing is, they fired their safeties coach. LSU. He's a safeties coach.
Right. So, all right. I think we can close things out there. You can follow Susan on Twitter at @SMillerDegnan. Follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. We will keep monitoring this quarterback situation and come back as news breaks there. 1 game left in college football season. It was another fun year on the Canes beat. And we won't really get any break until we find out what the heck is happening at quarterback. So hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
That is true. Just not tonight.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again for listening. And we will talk to you guys next week.